Okay, so Google's Gemini 3 is here, and the hype is pretty intense. But let's get real for a second. Beyond all the slick demos, what can this thing actually do for you? And maybe more importantly, where does it fall short? We're going to cut through all that noise and give you a straight, balanced look at what's new, what works, and what doesn't. Let's find out what Gemini 3 is really all about. You know, this quote from Sundar Pichai, it really nails it. We're at a point where the big challenge for AI isn't just about understanding the words you type. It's about understanding context, about getting the nuance, about reading the room. It's this jump from a simple tool to an actual intelligent partner. And that is exactly the problem Gemini 3 is trying to solve.
All right, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about this whole new era of AI. Then we'll dive into what it can actually do. That's the learn, build, and plan stuff. After that, we'll peek under the hood at the tech, see how it stacks up against its rivals, face the facts on costs and limitations, and finally, we'll give you the final verdict on what it all means.
So let's start with the big idea here. For the last couple of years, AI has pretty much lived inside a chat window. You ask a question, it gives an answer. But the real goal, the next huge leap, is to break AI out of that box. It's about moving way beyond just a simple back-and-forth conversation. And this slide, this is the whole story. We're shifting from the chatbot era to the digital colleague era. Think about that. The focus isn't on AI that just answers you anymore. It's about an AI that acts for you, an agent that can actually plan things out and handle complex jobs from start to finish. So to make that happen, Google has built Gemini 3 around 3 key abilities: to learn, to build, and to plan. These might sound a bit abstract, so let's check out some real-world examples of what they actually mean. First up, learn. Imagine you have a bunch of your grandmother's old handwritten recipes. The ink is faded, the handwriting is tough to read, maybe some are in another language. Gemini 3 can look at photos of those cards, read the handwriting, translate it, and format it all into a clean, digital cookbook. It's literally learning from and preserving a piece of your family's history. Okay, next is build. And this is where it starts to feel like sci-fi. You could give it a prompt like, make me a retro 3D spaceship game where I'm being chased by otters. It doesn't just write a description, it writes the code and actually builds a playable game. Some people are calling this vibe coding. You give it a vibe, an idea, and it turns it into a real application. No coding experience required. And finally, plan. This is where that digital colleague idea becomes very real. You could let Gemini 3 loose on your messy Gmail inbox. It'll sort through the chaos, pull out the urgent tasks, make a to-do list, and even draft replies for you to approve. It's not just understanding your inbox, it's actively managing it. So how in the world is it doing all of this? Let's pop the hood for a second and take a quick look at the engine behind it all. I promise we'll keep it simple. The first piece of the magic is something called native multimodality. That's a fancy way of saying Gemini didn't learn to read text first and then have vision bolted on later. It was built from day one to understand text, images, video, and sound all at the same time as one seamless thing. That's why it can look at a handwritten note and understand it just as well as typed text. The other key is its efficiency. Instead of being one giant brain trying to know everything, think of it more like a team of specialists. When you give it a task, it smartly sends that job to the right expert on the team. This mixture of experts approach is what lets it be both incredibly powerful and remarkably fast. Okay, the tech is impressive, but let's be honest, it's a war out there with heavy hitters like GPT and Claude. So how does Gemini 3 actually stack up when you put them head to head? Let's look at the data. Now, these numbers tell a fascinating story. When it comes to general knowledge and reasoning, that GPQA score, Gemini has a clear lead. Same goes for multimodal tasks. But then look at coding. It's basically a three-way tie. They're all phenomenal. But then you get to that last one, screen spot, which is about understanding user interfaces. Gemini's score isn't just a win, it's a blowout. And that's absolutely critical for building AIs that can actually use software. And this chart really just drives that point home. We're not talking about a small lead in multimodal understanding. It's a significant advantage in its ability to see, hear, and read information all at once. This is the foundation for all those cool learn and build examples we talked about. But hey, benchmarks aren't everything. There's also just the feel of it. What people are saying is that Gemini 3 is like the concise expert. It gets straight to the point. GPT 5.1, on the other hand, tends to have a warmer, more conversational vibe. So if your work is very visual, Gemini has the edge. If you're doing really complex deep coding, GPT 5.1 is still a beast. Look, this all sounds fantastic, but top-tier performance is rarely cheap, and no AI is perfect. So it's time for a quick reality check. Let's talk about the real-world costs and limitations of actually using Gemini 3. And the first dose of reality is the price. If you look at the cost to use the API, Gemini 3 Pro is a bit more expensive than its main competitor, GPT 5.1. It's in that premium category. So while you get that state-of-the-art performance, you are going to pay a bit more for it. The question is that premium worth it? Well, whether it's worth it really depends on reliability. Cost is one thing, but the question that hangs over every single AI model is, can you actually trust its answers? And here's where we see a really interesting shift. It seems like Gemini 3 has moved past the phase of just making up wild, nonsensical things. The errors it makes now are more subtle, more human. It's more likely to show a bit of bias or misunderstand your intent. This means our job changes from just correcting facts to providing better direction, kind of like you'd have to do with a new human team member. So after all that, where does this leave us? Let's boil it all down to a final, actionable verdict on who should be using Gemini 3. It really comes down to what you do every day. If your work revolves around visual content, making websites, creating animations, analyzing videos, that sort of thing, Gemini 3 is the clear winner right now. But if you're deep in complex back-end coding and need to build heavy-duty automation, GPT 5.1 is still an absolute powerhouse with a massive ecosystem. So the bottom line is this. The era of the simple chatbot is fading out. The age of the digital collie is here, with AIs that are ready to take on complex jobs all on their own. And because of that, the fundamental question we have to ask is changing. It's not what can AI do anymore. Now it's, are we ready to learn how to manage these new digital members of our team?